Number 7. Lloyd Love. On October the 20th of 2022, security guard Lloyd Love was only a few days into his job at American Eagle Protection Services in Aurora, Colorado, when he tried to cash a paycheck of $165. The transaction wouldn't go through because his name had been misspelled as Lloyd K. Love instead of Lloyd C. Love, according to an affidavit. He immediately called Patricia Johnson, who co-owned the firm with her 52-year-old husband Marvin, and demanded a new paycheck. Patricia told him that the initial check had to be accounted for before a new one could be issued. Love traveled to the Raytheon facility where Patricia worked as an outdoor security guard and confronted her. Marvin arrived not long afterwards and tried to resolve the matter, reportedly telling his wife to write a new paycheck. As the conversation unfolded, 35-year-old Love suddenly brandished a handgun and shot Marvin in the face, killing him on the spot. He then fled the scene and called his girlfriend to pick him up, subsequently telling her he'd done something stupid and that the less she knew, the better. Minutes later, a local SWAT team pulled over the couple and took Love into custody. He would later tell detectives that he'd heard a voice in his head controlling him and telling him that Marvin had slept with his girlfriend. The woman told law enforcement that Love had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, but that he hadn't been taking his medicine because he didn't like the way it made him feel. Love refused to leave his cell for his first hearing on October the 24th, prompting a Facebook post from Patricia that read, "Devil, your judgment day is coming." Number 6. Sarah Gonzalez McClin. On January the 19th of 2014, the lifeless body of Kansas man Harold Sasko was found on the living room floor of his Lawrence home. He'd been drugged into his submission, his wrists and ankles were zip-tied, and his neck had been slashed so deep that he was nearly decapitated. Sasko's blood was smeared on the walls and used to write the word freedom. At the time, the man was living with 19-year-old Sarah Gonzalez McClin, whom had worked for him at one of the 3 Cece's Pizzas restaurants he owned. The teenager was missing when the police found Sasko's body, as was the man's 2008 Nissan Altima. 6 days after the murder, Gonzalez McClin was found living in the vehicle parked at a campground in Everglades National Park in Dade County, Florida. She was taken into custody and confessed to plunging a knife into Sasko's neck because she wanted to know what it felt like to kill. During the trial that followed, her defense argued that she was not guilty by reason of insanity, after a psychologist they'd hired claimed she suffered from multiple personalities. The killing, as per the defense, had been committed by one of Gonzalez McClin's compartmentalized personalities named Elisa. A jury rejected the defense, found the young woman guilty, and she was sentenced to 50 years in prison because the killing had been carried out in an especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel manner. Following a 2021 appeal, her sentence was reduced to 25 years after her lawyer and the prosecution agreed that her counsel had been ineffective during her initial trial. He failed to opt for the battered woman syndrome defense and didn't inform her that a plea deal would have cut her sentence in half. Gonzalez McClin alleged that Sasko would routinely force himself on her while she lived in his home. The victim's family rejected the claim, maintaining that the man had only tried to help her, but accepted the reduction. Number 5. Clarence David Mallory and Carter Carol Cervantes. A resident of the River Ranch Apartments in Fort Worth, Texas, called 911 on November the 28th of 2014 to report that there was fire in an apartment above theirs. After extinguishing the blaze, firefighters found the lifeless body of 31-year-old Ashley Harris on her bedroom floor. She'd been bound with duct tape, savagely beaten and strangled to death. There was no sign of robbery or forced entry, and the killer had locked the door behind them. At the time of her murder, Harris was an assistant manager at an American Eagle Outfitters store at Fort Worth's Hulen Mall. Her apartment keys and the keys to the store were missing from her home. One neighbor told the police that they'd earlier spotted a 2-door black Infiniti parked at the apartment complex. From that point on, the case unraveled, as it was determined that the vehicle was owned by 25-year-old Carter Cervantes, a former American Eagle Outfitters employee. She'd worked at the store with her boyfriend David Mallory, aged 19, and had been managed by Harris. In August of 2014, a hooded burglar took $18,000 from the store, and Harris pointed to the couple as the likely suspects. The theft case remained open, with the police But the manager's suspicions led to Cervantes and Mallory's termination. The brutal manner in which Harris had been killed suggested that it had been personal, and the police regarded the couple as suspects. As the investigation progressed, Cervantes agreed to speak with detectives. She was given a water bottle, and during a break in questioning, surveillance cameras caught her wiping it down after drinking from it. She and Mallory were allowed to go home. CCTV footage from the Hewlin Mall captured Cervantes trying to break into the American Eagle Outfitters store on the morning of November the 29th with Harris's stolen keys. Unaware that the locks had been changed, a search warrant would provide law enforcement with further evidence that the couple had been behind Harris's killing, partly for revenge but also as a part of a plan to rob the store of its Black Friday earnings. Blood matching Harris's was found on the floor mats of Cervantes' car and on a gun that she owned, likely from her pistol whipping the victim with it. Text messages between her and Mallory revealed that they'd been planning on the heist and murder. Both were charged with capital murder and sentenced to life without parole. Number 4. Jeremy Jerome Spicer. 31-year-old Jeremy Jerome Spicer had been working as a trucker for Winners Freight Logistics, based out of the Chicago suburb of Burr Ridge, for about a week in March of 2022. He delivered one load for the company, but there was a disagreement on whether he'd make another delivery, and sources reported he was going to be fired. On March the 22nd, Spicer went to the company's office and shot his boss, Nikola Misovich, with a .40 caliber Glock handgun. 30-year-old Misovich died at the scene. Spicer moved through the building and arrived at a former workplace, Force Logistics, where he shot an unnamed 31-year-old female accountant. She was subsequently taken to Good Samaritan Hospital, where she had surgery for a leg wound and was pronounced to be in stable condition. As later reported by the police, Spicer went to another former workplace and asked for the owner, but left after being told he wasn't available. The man, for whom Spicer had worked for 3 weeks in November of the previous year, later credited leaving for the gym 20 minutes early with saving his life. By the time that Spicer had made his way to another business on Madison Street, law enforcement had set up a perimeter and was closing in on him. When the first officer arrived at his location, Spicer fatally turned the gun on himself. Number 3. Felix Cabrera. 86-year-old Felix Cabrera was known as an easygoing and likable janitor who'd worked for the Sugarcane Growers Cooperative of Florida for roughly 31 years. Leading up to June of 2021, Cabrera learned that he was going to be let go and was reportedly devastated by the news. He'd outlived all his relatives and his life revolved around his job. Cabrera had known about the termination for several weeks and on what was expected to be his last day spoke to his boss, 67-year-old William Combas, at the cooperative's Belle Glade headquarters. The latter told the janitor to clock out that afternoon and never return. Cabrera, a Cuban immigrant who'd been exiled to the US in 1980, was caught by surveillance cameras heading towards Combas's office less than an hour later. He briefly stopped on the way, pulled a handgun from his pocket, and got it ready to fire. Upon reaching the office, he pleaded with his boss to let him keep his job for another year, citing financial difficulties. Combas refused, got out of his chair and started walking towards Cabrera, telling the man to leave his office. In the moments that followed, the janitor brandished the weapon and shot his boss multiple times. Combas was found bleeding by responding law enforcement and later succumbed to his injuries. Cabrera was arrested at the sugar mill and later told investigators that he'd felt disrespected by the way in which Combas had talked to him in front of other employees. He was charged with murder and, as of the latest updates, had been expected to undergo a mental health evaluation. Number 2. Jose Rojas. In April of 2012, Jose Rojas, a computer expert at an insurance adjuster business in Coral Gables, Florida, traveled to his office building carrying what would later be described as a bag of murder tools. It contained duct tape, a wooden mop handle, gloves, and a pellet gun, which he'd bought on his way to work. He lay in wait, placing a dark wool hood over his head and the gloves on his hands. Rojas ambushed his boss, 59-year-old Francis Venezia, and co-worker Robert James when they arrived at the office. He held them at gunpoint and bound their limbs in duct tape, also placing rags on their mouths. Rojas then forced Venezia to call her financial institution and write him a check from her checking account. As she and James started screaming for help, Rojas relentlessly beat them, inflicting fatal blunt force trauma and lacerations. The commotion resulted in law enforcement being alerted, and responding officers found Rojas at a supermarket down the street from the offices covered in blood. He admitted to forcing Venezia to write the check and hitting her with the mop handle when she started screaming. Rojas claimed that he didn't remember what happened next, aside from seeing pools of blood around the office and on his clothes. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, armed kidnapping, and attempted armed robbery. Number 1. Fang Lu. Mao Yi-sun and Mi Shi-sun were gunned down along with their sons Titus and Timothy on January the 30th of 2014 at their home in Houston, Texas. All were found in separate bedrooms with gunshot injuries to their heads in an incident that shocked the city's Chinese community. Investigators learned that Mao Yi had previously had an argument with a man by the name of Fang Lu. The latter had asked that Mao Yi, his boss, support him as he tried to transfer to a different department within the oil and gas company, Cameron International Corporation. Lu was angry at Mao Yi, suspecting that he hadn't made the recommendation and instead said derogatory things about him. He noted colleagues started treating him differently. A day after he'd asked for the promotion, Lu told conflicting stories to the authorities about a gun he'd purchased and later returned to a store without a barrel. By the time an arrest warrant was issued, he'd already traveled back to his native China. Subsequent DNA analysis confirmed his presence at the Sun crime scene, but law enforcement feared they'd never make the arrest. On September the 11th of 2022, over 8 years after the Sun family murders, Lu was taken into custody only minutes after arriving in San Francisco from China. One member of the community representative Houston Chinese Alliance claimed that the arrest opened up further questions, including if Lu had returned to the US before or why he'd taken the risk of coming back in the first place. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have your own business but only earn minimal wage, or work for a horrible boss and earn double? Let us know in the comments section below.